And hello, everybody. I try to get out on some walks with Anne whenever I can, and I was really delighted when she asked me if I could do a presentation about Long Island tonight. And right now on Long Island and through year end, there's going to be about 325 different species of birds. Believe it or not, over 130 of them nest right here, which most people don't realize just how many species nest locally. And but I'm not going to talk about them. This is the end of the migration and the beginning of what's known as the vagrant season. And out of those 325 birds, there's about 70 that are pretty rare, that are the birds everyone wants to see when they go out birding on Long Island for a day. And they're rare, they're vagrants, and some of the birds are even megas. Like a couple of weeks ago, we had a northern wheat ear out on the North Fork of Long Island, and right now we have on Staten Island the wood stork, which Staten Island is right over here. But this is Long Island, and my presentation's two parts. The first part is about the rarest of the rare, those 70 birds. I'm not going to talk about all 70, but I'll go through a few of them. And then in the second half, I'm going to talk about these spots that are circled. We're going to start over here in Brooklyn. We're going to come down to Jamaica Bay. We're going to go over to Nassau County. We're going to go to Jones Beach. We're going to go to Robert Moses. We're going to go to the Connetquot River Complex. We're going to go to Dune Road. We're going to go out to Montauk. And then on a long ride home, we're going to stop on the North Shore of Long Island for a couple of last birds. So I'll talk more about this in the second half of the presentation. And in the first half, I'm going to get right to some of those rare birds for the vagrant season. Ducks, for instance, between now and the end of the year, there's going to be 31 species of ducks on Long Island. And in the chat, I posted, if you take a look at the chat, I posted in the chat all the ducks I'm not going to talk about tonight. But these are the birds that are rare to see, and some of them, like the harlequin, is everyone gold to see the harlequin. I mean, who don't want to go down to Point Lookout and have these three rough and tumble ducks staring right back at you boldly like that? Okay. This bird here is Eurasian teal. It's the European subspecies of the green teal. You just don't see too many of them. So that's always a good bird to see every once in a while. Black-bellied whistling, we don't see too many of them in the fall, but they're possible. The mottled duck really comes from down south and especially Florida, but there's one or two that appear every year during the vagrant season in Nassau County at a place called Avon Lake. It's a very sight-faithful bird, and it tends to come back. The Eurasian teal, there's a couple of them around each fall, either at Jamaica Bay. This particular one was at Heckscher State Park. Tufted duck, there was one at Fork Pond last year. The king eiders show up at several places. Really, the one that everyone wants to see is the adult male. Is just a stunning bird, and there's several places on Long Island that we can see them that I'll talk about. The harlequin duck reliably returns, very sight faithful to Point Lookout jetties every year. Last year, I saw 15 there, and some people saw up to 30 of them. And it's just a stunning duck. And they make a living in the crashing surf and the waves. And a lot of these birds, when they're brought into museums and things, they have broken bones that have healed just because they get slammed up against the jetties. So they go in and out of all the jetty rocks and grab whatever they can off the bottom there as waves are crashing in on them. So it's really an admirable duck. And you can just see that they look pretty tough. Geese, swans, and other water birds like grebes and loons, there's the possibility to see 18 of them, but these are the nine that are rarer to see. A Ross's goose, there's not that many. I often have to go to the Hudson Valley, Binghamton, or Rochester this time of year to see one. The greater white-fronted goose, we get a few on the North Shore. And the same thing for the pink-footed goose. The barnacle goose, there's not as many sightings, but they're way out on the North Fork. Cackling goose is getting to be a little more common, but again, there's two ponds that they're very site faithful to. So on Long Island, if you don't want to go scanning through thousands and thousands of every flock of Canada geese you see, you can either schedule an afternoon once you know that they're back there to either go to A.J. Henderson Pond or Avon Lake, and you can see a cackling goose without going through thousands of Canada geese every day. A trumpeter swan, we don't have too many. We had one at Fort Pond last year. I'll probably need to go to Montezuma in early December to see a lot of them. And the same thing with the tundra swan. I'll probably go to Montezuma. The eared grebe, we do get a few. A couple of spots we get them out. The Pacific loon, last year there was a couple around, and you just never know where they're going to turn up. So this is a great white-fronted goose, and I know you guys get them at Rye Playland and other spots in Westchester too. I'm not a photographer, so some of the photos aren't the best, like some of the earlier photos. But this bird was at a small pond near Northport called Tung Ting. This is a Ross's goose, and really the diagnostic mark is look how short and stubby its bill is. This is a pink-footed goose that was also out in the Northport area. For some reason, these vagrant geese like the North Shore and especially Northport. A black-headed gull, we get them in a few places. It's small. You have to scan through flocks of Bonapartes. This particular one was in Brooklyn on the west end of Long Island. This bird was at a marsh complex called Plum Beach. This bird sitting in a wet parking lot is a glaucous gull. Okay, we see a few of them. I really don't know how many you get to see in the Hudson Valley, but on Long Island you could see a few of these. They're far from common. They do come from parts up north, Greenland and Iceland and Upper Canada, and this bird. And that last bird, in fact, is named an Iceland gull. Okay, so glaucous in Iceland. And raptors, I took a different approach. These are the 8 raptors that are common on Long Island. Because the 5 raptors that are rare, we hardly ever see. But if you do come to Long Island, especially on the outer barrier beaches, you have a good chance to see migrating peregrines, kestrels, merlin, and northern harriers. Some of the harriers will stay the winter. It's pretty cool. Other late foot, we have, like everywhere else, we have plenty of red-tailed hawks. They'll stay the winter here as well as in lower Hudson Valley as well. And they'll even start to nest in the winter. The Cooper's hawks, some of them will stay during the milder winters, and some of them will stay right on the barrier beaches if they find enough thickets with enough sparrows that they can subsist through the winter. Sparrows, cardinals, chickadees, and birds like that flock together during the winter in some very dense barrier beach thickets. And then the Cooper's hawk will just have a milk run of those areas, and some of them will stay on the beaches as long as they can. Sharp-shinned hawk, this is a bald eagle. We have a few pairs that will try to nest here over the winter. Some are successful. I mentioned Tung Ting Pond. This is a pair that nested there this year. And there's a pair that nests in Massapequa Preserve. The avian flew some of the eagles that nested, or at least One of this bird's mates last year fell out of this nest dead into the pond because of the avian flu. And there's a couple of other eagles that have succumbed to that on Long Island as well. Okay. But these birds don't so much migrate down the beaches, um, but these birds certainly do, as well as the ospreys. But the osprey migration has mostly ended by now, although there are a few stragglers that you still can see. These are four of our eight owls. These are the migratory owls. All three of these two birds were seen at Jones Beach. This bird was seen at Jamaica Bay, a snowy, a saw-whet, and a short ear. The long-eared owl is hard to find on Long Island. Okay. They do find a few in Prospect Park and Central Park. And the last one I actually saw was at Rye Playland myself, or in the spring of this year. Okay. Um, the other four owls that nest and raise families here, the most common are the great horned and the eastern screech. And then there are some barn owls, which really need our conservation help. And there are some barred owls that also raise families on Long Island. But these birds only migrate through, and they are flying across Long Island Sound right now and hitting the North Shore and then going west from there to Jersey. Okay. But some of them are sticking around and resting up and refueling at some of the places. There are rumors, a couple of people mentioned snowy owls already, but they won't say where. They won't tell me where. And a couple of people have mentioned rough-legged hawks. And the reason I associate those two species is because they both depend on the boom and bust cycle of lemmings. The rough-legged hawk and the snowy owl will stay up north if there's enough lemmings for them to get through the winter. And if there's not, they'll come down south. And the last 2 years, there haven't been too many on Long Island. But this year, it already seems that a couple are on the move. And that's early. We really don't expect to go out looking for them until like Thanksgiving or later. So that's good that some people letting me know they've seen one, but they're just not letting me know exactly letting me know where they've seen it. But there's only so many places it will show up. And I'll talk about that when I get to the hotspots. Now, these are truly vagrants. Most of these birds come from out west. We really don't know why. It's probably just some of these birds probably get an urge to explore other areas. It's the old adage, nature doesn't like to put all its eggs in one basket. And that's why I think these birds become vagrants and wander. But there's other species there's other theories like these young birds on their first migration that were born this year. And there's a theory that their navigation systems are exactly 180 degrees off. So instead of flying west, they fly east. But no one really knows for sure. But I've seen other animals, mammals, and fish that do follow water or follow paths through the terrain in order to explore new areas. And I kind of think that's what some of these birds do. That some birds of every species do this, just like I already know, seen some fish and some mammals that do the same thing. So this is a Astrota flycatcher. This is gray kingbird at Jamaica Bay, a western tanager at Jones Beach, and this is a western kingbird at Sunken Meadow on the north shore of Long Island Sound. This is another true vagrant, a mountain bluebird that showed up. Some of these hummingbirds come into people's gardens and kind of almost get trapped there. And it's good for birders. There's a purple gallinoo out at Montauk right now for a couple of days. Sandhill cranes are pretty rare. When I go up to Montezuma, I'll probably see plenty of sandhill cranes by the dozens in early December. And I know in Orange County, there's at least two generations of sandhill cranes that are nesting at Liberty Loop. There was originally a pair that had an offspring, and then that pair came back this year, and the offspring came back with the mate this year, and those sandhill cranes have been there most of the year. A Townsend solitaire, there's a spot that I'm going to tell you where they've been seen on Long Island. Also, a very rare bird. I'm not so sure that's a vagrant, uh, but it's a very rare bird. On the shorebirds and others, a black-necked stilt has been seen at a place called Oceanside Marine Nature Study in Nassau County. And once a bird is seen somewhere, there's pretty good possibility that it or another of its kind will return there, if not this year, next year. Uh, the purple sandpiper, they're pretty common around jetties. They stay on top of the rocks and don't get knocked around by the crashing surf. They stay above the crashing surf usually. But they're a beautiful and powerful sandpiper that's only here in the winter. And there's a number of spots that I'm going to let you know in the second part where they can be seen. The western cattle egret, the story is it flew across from Africa to South America and is now working its way up to conquer North America. Okay, so we do get a few of them, and they could show up in the summer too, but also show up in the fall. I included the red knot here because it's a shorebird we take for granted maybe on Long Island, but I'm not so sure how many people from the Hudson Valley get a chance to see red knots. Now they look like dunlins, I guess you could say, except they have all these chevrons on them. And this is a time of year when they had a lot of chevrons. As it gets more into the winter, they start to lose these chevrons and start to be harder to distinguish. But these little marks are a good diagnostic mark. The red knot's in trouble. We don't see very many on Long Island, but we do see a few. But how many of them actually get up to the Arctic breeding grounds? I don't think very many are really making it up there anymore. I don't think they get that far, most of them. Okay. Whether they run out of gas or whatever happens, it doesn't seem like the. And the important thing, if we have time at the end, are the horseshoe crab eggs. And there's a bill in front of the governor now to ban the taking of horseshoe crabs in New York. And maybe at the end of the talk, if we have time, we could talk a little bit more about that. The European goldfinch is a neat little bird. It's a pet bird, but in Prospect Park, they've established a colony. A lot of animals that establish colonies, they can have a colony for the short term, but they may not survive for the long term. But right now, this is a very, very beautiful goldfinch. And since it's naturalized in the Prospect Park area, if you see one, it will count on your year list. If you see a European goldfinch anywhere else, it won't count because it's an escapee from somebody's pet. Okay. We really don't have pileated woodpeckers on Long Island, but this year especially they've been showing up. And like I say, testing if they can colonize here. Not too many, but a few. Some of the other vagrants, the painted bunting is surely a vagrant. The Townsend's warbler as well. The yellow-headed blackbird, vagrant. Lock bunting comes from Colorado, vagrant. All birds that we can see, as well as some of these others. The Audubon's warbler was seen at Jones Beach last year. It's a subspecies, a beautiful subspecies of the yellow rump. Very beautiful bird with a nice yellow chin and breast. but otherwise looks very similar to a yellow rump. The yellow-breasted chat's a tough one to get. Everyone wants to get that. Henslow sparrow is practically extinct, and the same can be in New York, and the same can be said of the Licantes. There's just not that many of them anymore that we see. The black-throated gray warbler is a very rare warbler, but this is the time of year to see it. Uh, Birds that everyone wants to see in the salt marshes, and Long Island has many of them, is the seaside sparrow, the salt marsh sparrow, and the Nelson sparrow. And if you really want to see them, come to Long Island in the next week on the high tide, preferably early in the morning on not a very blustery day, but practically high tide at any time of the day, pushes them up to the top of the stalks, and they'll be peeking around at first light, and then they'll start to relocate and adjust their positions at sundown as well. So when the sun goes down, it's a good time to see them. Some people say these three species are hard to tell apart, but the differences are obvious in these pictures. The one they say that's going to go extinct and they're worried about is the salt marsh. But honestly, I see far fewer seasides. I'm more worried about the seaside. Both the seaside and the salt marsh do nest here. The Nelson sparrow nests in New England and Canada and only moves through here in the spring and fall. Pelagics, ocean birds. We had a nice brown booby at Fire Island a couple of weeks ago. I'm not going to talk too much about alces today because they're really an after New Year's group of birds. But the one I didn't see after New Year's this year, the only one I didn't see was the thick-billed murre. So that's why I put a picture here to remind myself I need to see that bird before New Year's for my year list. Some of these other birds, there is an offshore trip on the American Princess that goes out of Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn. And that's really the only chance to see some of these birds. Some of these birds do come to shore, but they're often birds that have a health problem, and they come to shore because they just can't make it out on the ocean all the time anymore. Okay, so some of these birds will come in to recuperate, and then hopefully they'll go back to the offshore existence. Okay. So that was part one, and those were the species that I wanted to tell you about. And you can see them all at some of these spots here. And this is the second half of the presentation. I hope I'm doing good on time. And in this part, I'm going to tell you about 9 places where you can see and which of those rare birds you can see at these 9 different places. So this is the Hudson River. This is Manhattan in here somewhere. This is Manhattan. This is the East River. This is the Verrazano. This is the place called the Narrows, which I'm going to talk about because a lot of rare gulls end up in the Narrows mixed in with Bonapartes. This line here identifies Brooklyn, which includes Coney Island, Breezy Point, and part of Jamaica Bay. That's the boundary of Brooklyn. This is the boundary of Queens, which includes Jamaica Bay. This is the boundary of Nassau County. And then 2/3 of Long Island is Suffolk County. 1/3 are the other 3 counties. There are also 3 ecoregions on Long Island. This ecoregion down the middle is the one that the glacier in its runoff carved out. Okay, 84A. The EPA gives numbers and alpha designations. So 84A is the middle of mostly Suffolk County. 59G is mostly the other 3 counties. 59G is a version of a woodland, of a mainland woodland, of an Appalachian woodland. Okay. So there's a lot of tree birds and a lot of forest birds in this green area. I'm not going to talk so much about 84A area today, although there are some good birds there. But what we're mostly going to do is start in Brooklyn. We're going to come down to what's called the barrier beaches and the coastal marshes. So these long strings of the barrier beaches, everything, these bays behind them are the coastal marshes. Okay. We're going to run down a bunch of them. And then once we get past this last bay, which is Southampton, on our way out to Montauk, this becomes more and more headlands. You can see there's no more bays, there's no more marshes. And then it just becomes cliffs and a promontory sticking out into sea with waves crashing into it. So this is called the head. So around somewhere around here, what's called the barrier beaches turn to headlands and bluffs. Okay. Our first spot in Brooklyn is Prospect Park, Greenwood Cemetery. They're really two of the best places on the East Coast to bird. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about Bush Terminal, which is a place where you can see rare seabirds. So Brooklyn, Queens, Nassau support an Appalachian forest variant, although you can see how urbanized it is. Prospect Park is a jewel, an oasis, 585 acres with a 60-acre lake. The water features are also always very important. It has the European goldfish colony. It's kind of tough to see, but if you take a look at the bird, it's a very beautiful bird. And Greenwood Cemetery is within walking distance. It's also 478 acres. It's a world-class arboretum, and it has 4 ponds. Again, the water features. And Bush Terminal Park used to be an industrial piers, and it's been converted, and they've built a tidal pond, they've restored wetlands, and they've built a heavily forested peninsula with native trees and understory. So it's a very good place for birds now. It's a very good place for the birds in the lower Hudson Bay, lower New York Bay. You can see the Iceland gulls, the glaucus. You can see Eurasian widgeons, which are not that common. And last year there was a western meadowlark here in some of the scrub fields. Okay. The Verrazano Narrows, which is down below here, that's and it's literally the narrowest section at the mouth of the Hudson River. You can see many purple sandpipers on the rocks there, and you can see rare vagrant gulls, which are the small birds that mix in with the Bonapartes. You might be able to see a little gull. You might be able to see a common gull, but that's where people would go to see them on Long Island. Okay. So here's Prospect Park, here's Greenwood, here's Bush Terminal. And then once you come down Ocean Parkway, we get to Coney Island. There's a very good sea watching platform at Beach 32nd. So from here, you have a clear view to Breezy Point and to Sandy Hook, New Jersey, and every bird in between. This is Coney Island, which has a very long pier where people see a lot of nice waterfowl. And starting in late December, they start to see razorbills and other alcids after New Year's. Corbin Plaza again has a sea watching spot where you can watch the back of Breezy Point. This little area here is a sandbar that birds stack up on at low tide. But with a good scope, you can see all those birds from here. Breezy Point is one of the best sea watching spots in New York City. This is in Queens. But there's also a marshy area, Rocky Point. Fort Tilden is just a great place that also has a forested area. Reese Landing, you can see everything coming in and out of the mouth of Jamaica Bay. And Reese Beach has good birds on the front, but it also has a nice parking lot that you can, on rainy days, and then you can get parking lot birds. Floyd Bennett is just a great area. I won't go into any details, but it's a known area for storm birding. When there's storms, birds that no longer want to fly will put down here. And it's amazing what comes down sometimes. Birds that you wouldn't really normally see come out of the sky and put down here, even on some of the runways. Um, Marine Park is a great salt marsh. And if you want to see the seaside, the salt marsh, and the Nelson sparrows, come right down here early in the morning if it's a high tide, or late in the at dusk if it's a high tide. Okay, it's the closest marsh on Long Island that you can get to, across the Verrazano, which is right here. Okay, and then this is the Jamaica Bay complex, which I won't go into too much because I'm a little worried about time. Um, from there, we come to southern Nassau County, and again, this is woods and ponds. Okay, it's urban, suburban, state, and local parks are great. The western third is Appalachian forest, was what it used to be. It still kind of wants to be, and still has those species of trees and understory. You can come right down Sunrise Highway number 27. You can stop at Hempstead Lake. You can stop at Smith Pond. You can go to Norman J. Levy Park, which is a capped landfill. You can go to Cammons Park, which has a winter roost of black-crowned night herons. It's well worth saying. It's the only roost of night herons that I know of on Long Island. And then you can go on to Mill Pond. And then Massapequa Pond Preserve is just a great place. Okay. On the way back, you can drop down to Oceanside Marine Nature Study area, and you can see a lot of the birds that will be in the salt marshes. Now, right across the bridge is the Jones Beach complex, which I'll talk about on another slide. But if you just want to run down 27, you can really have a good day trip. You can hit all these areas. And Avon Lake is at the end, and that's where you might find a cackling goose and you might find a mottled duck. Okay. And the Oceanside Marine Nature Center, the Salt Marsh, it has a metal boardwalk, a grate, like a subway grate, elevated above the marsh. So you're literally walking 2 or 3 feet above the marsh, and the birds are right at the side of the boardwalk. The seasides, the Nelsons, the sparrows. I told you there was a black-necked stilt there last year, so hopefully one will return there this year. And then this is our walks. You can see we go to the Jones Beach, Hempstead Lake, Massapequa Lake, Jamaica Bay, Mill Pond. We cycle through, during the year, we cycle through all those places so the people on the walks can get to see them in the different seasons. And we also go to Oceanside, but not this late in the year. Okay. And so this is the Jones Beach complex. It's right underneath the areas I just showed you. There's Fishing Pier 10, the Coast Guard Station, Jones Beach Energy and Nature Preserve. Then you go across here, you have Point Lookout, Nickerson, Lido Preserve, and Marina West. Okay. Marina West is a shorebird roost at high tide, and if you want to see red knots, they'll be there till Christmas, roosting on the breakwater, along with 5 or 6 or 7 other species of shorebirds. Many of those birds will try to stay as long as they can into the winter. At Point Lookout is where you'll see the harlequin ducks and the purple sandpipers on the jetties. This Jones Beach Nature Center is called West End 1 and 2. There's bird walks and hawk watch platforms that are raised over the dunes, and there are ponds in there. There are dune ponds in there. Jones Beach Inlet, you can see blackhead gulls flying in and out with the Bonapartes. As we move further down the barrier beaches, we get to Robert Moses and the Fire Island Lighthouse. Field 5 and Field 2 are the places to go. And then from Field 5, there's a boardwalk to the lighthouse that goes right through habitat. And then when you finish there, you can wrap up at Captree State Park. And you can go down to Oak Beach, and that's another good day trip. I like to link together spots like this, so you know if you can time box it, if you can cut your day into time boxes and hit all these spaces, it's a lot better than just staying at one place all day. So Oak Beach, who knows? This is a big, huge, giant sandbar. It's no good in the summer because all people with boats and surfboards and things camp there. But this time of year, any brown pelican or godwit or whimbrel that is kind of off course and wants to hang out will come down here either 2 hours before low tide, and we'll rest up for a few and have a snack and everything else. So any vagrant shorebirds, and earlier I mentioned the Townsend's solitaire, and there's in a couple of years, for whatever reason, that species is known to come in here. Okay, so that's a good spot also that I'm going to have my eye on this fall. This is, as we move further out on the island, we're in Suffolk now, and Robert Moses Park is also in Suffolk, which we just left. And this is what I call the Connetquot River Complex. Again, I like to bunch locations together. So as soon as we get there, the Connetquot River is freshwater above the Sunrise Highway. Below the Sunrise Highway, it becomes increasingly brackish out towards Timber Point. The Bayard Cutting Arboretum is it's just amazing diversity of birds, an amazing diversity of world-class trees. It's a nice place, and rarities do show up there. Timber Point is a wetland, and again, you're going to get your salt marsh Nelsons and seaside sparrows here. And Heckscher State Park, the beauty of it, if you see down here, these are all parking lots that get puddles in them after it rains. It's not only the parking lots, but all these meadows also get very soggy, and a lot of birds come in here. Okay, but the whole complex of Heckscher State Park is huge, so a rare bird could show up anywhere in here, but especially these parking lots and the wet meadows are places to go after in the rain. If you don't want to walk out into the woods and hike the trails in the rain, this is one of the places I go. There's 4 or 5 parking lots and quite a few wet meadows, and it's a river mouth, and it's the coastal marsh as well. In the freshwater, you get an awful lot of birds like common mergansers. I mean, I've seen flocks of 100 common mergansers here above Sunrise Highway. Bayard Arboretum, it's a place to see, but really just stunning in the spring, okay? Because all these plants from around the world and trees from around the world are blooming. And one of these wet meadows is where a Eurasian teal showed up last year, okay? And the mountain bluebird showed up at Heckscher State Park too. Mountain bluebird was along one of these roads in the median. It was not in the parking lots. So that's where I say these rare birds could show up at any location. This is a pretty huge park here. And then you have these other spots. You have 3 other just killer spots to boot, like with 5 minutes away. So this is a good complex. You have your freshwater, your brackish, and your saltwater. As we go further down, this is called Dune Road. I usually come across the Ponquo Bridge. I stop right here. It's a long strip. A lot of vagrants in here, Iceland gulls in here. Then I go down to Shinnecock Inlet. I check the bay. There's a king eider more often than not, but also check the ocean and the inlet. There's birds that stack up out here too. Way back, I hit some of these other roads. Tiana Bay has not only a bayside complex, with docks and everything else like that that you can explore. It also has a beachside complex with the raised sea watching platform. Kind of the same thing about Hot Dog Beach is only on this side, and then you get to the Quogue Boardwalk. But the King Ida, bittern, Iceland gull, vagrants of all kinds. Hot Dog Beach was where the loch bunting was seen, and I didn't put it on a list, but a Harris's sparrow from out west was seen here. So this is a known area for these vagrants. And there's a subspecies of savanna sparrow, which is a little larger and sandier colored version of the savanna sparrow. And the crazy thing is, it really only lives on the first dune on the barrier beaches, but it can get into some of these, it can be seen in some bays and places, but really it migrates along the barrier beaches this time of year through the end of the year. And I really like to look for them here because this barrier beach is much narrower than the others. So it has to be, this is kind of a funnel point where there's just less area I have to cover to see the Ipswich sparrow here. Okay. Then we get out to Montauk, and this is really the jewel. I've listed some hotspots here, and this is the tufted duck was here at Fort Pond. The trumpeter swan was here at Fort Pond. I mean, to Long Island, it's a big deal because it's the only trumpeter swan in like a few years. The gulls come in here at Lake Montauk, especially glaucus, Iceland, black-legged kittiwakes. Out here at George's Lighthouse Cafe, given favorable conditions, right now over the weekend, people were seeing hundreds of pelagics, 6, 7, multiple manx, which is pretty rare, and they didn't see any Jaegers this weekend, but if I get a chance to go out to Montauk this weekend, I'll be hoping for the Jaegers. Now, the alcids I left to the end, and these are birds that live mostly out in the ocean. In some years, and increasingly, I guess because of global warming and food supply, they're coming more into Long Island, so it seems. But be that as it may, in December, razorbills will start to filter in. And really, after New Year's, the dovekie is very rare. The common murre will come in, the thick-billed murre, which is the only one I haven't seen so far this year. Black guillemot's a beautiful, more slender bird. And especially the razorbills start appearing in mid to late December. But then all these species will peak in January at Montauk especially. But then there'll be smaller numbers of them can also be seen off the western end. Coney Island, Breezy Point, Jones Beach is also a good spot for alcids. But if you really get there at the crack of dawn, if it's the right conditions, you could see like 700, 800, 1,000, 2,000 razorbills. I mean, it's amazing. You can pull on some days. You can pull in to the parking lot at Lake Montauk Inlet. There's a parking lot on the east side, but usually the best place to park is on. So I pulled into the parking lot with the bird group from the Queens Bird Club. We had like 7 or 8 black-legged kittiwakes flying over our heads in the parking lot. So and there's just nowhere else where you get to see that. It was truly amazing. And that's the reason to go to Montauk. When I do, I stay overnight because even for me, it's a long ride, and I stay the best place I know, nice and clean and friendly, and a reasonable price is born free by the sea. Okay. Now, we've gone down the South Shore, and then on the way back, we're going to stop on Long Island Sound. Okay. There's on the way back, the first place we get to is Nissaquag River State Park. Great place in late fall. Sunken Meadow gets its share of rare birds for sure. Crab Meadow Beach, for that's the place where people go because out of a huge raft of common golden eyes, there'll sometimes be a Barrow's golden eye in there. Okay, so you have to get out your scope and look at great these birds way offshore most of the time, and hopefully you'll be able to pick out the Barrow's golden eye. If not, I'll probably go up to the Hudson River to Kingston to see some of the golden Barrow's golden eyes there if really have no luck trying to see this one. Now, the pink-footed geese, the white-fronted goose, they tend to come into this region for some unknown reason that only they know. They come into Tung Ting Park. That's where the bald eagles have a nest too. Quams, Quamstead Park is also a very good area for vagrants. And then on the way home, or if I don't want to go way far out on the North Shore, if I'm coming from home, I like this spot here, Friarbill Beach. Not exactly sure how you say it, but there's a lot of winter waterfowl here. So these will mostly be the seabirds here, okay? But lots of some days. So this concludes our tour of Long Island, and I want to end on the note that things are looking up. This is, as of last night, 371.8 million birds have crossed New York State. Now, some of them could have flown across from end to end and never landed, but still, this source is Birdcast, which has been in operation since 2018, and this is the average of the past 6 years since 2018. This is their historic average, and look how many more birds flew over New York this fall. And it was the same thing in the spring. More birds migrated over New York in the spring, and it wasn't as many because not only did those more birds from the spring come back, but their offspring came back too. So this is a huge increase. So this is good. It's been a good year. Maybe these birds are flying over New York instead of Philadelphia or Jersey. But the thing is, for the radar recordings of what's gone over New York, it's been quite an increase since the last 6 years. So that's why I'm very positive and hope this keeps up. And that's why I say things are looking up.